Who, where, what, why, don't forget when. I'll tell you a story I can't wait to begin. I'll tell you all my feelings, you'll sense it's from the heart. I'll tell you a story I can't wait to start. There once was a girl with golden curly hair. She tried some porridge and she broke a little chair. She went to bed as quiet as a mouse, and when she woke up she was in the bear's house. Who, where, what, why, don't forget when. I'll tell you a story I can't wait to begin. I'll tell you all my feelings, you'll sense it's from the heart. I'll tell you a story I can't wait to start. The big bad wolf said, little pigs, let me come in. No, no, not on your life, not by your chinny chins. So huffed and he puffed and he blew 2 homes away, but it was the little pigs who lived another day. Who, where, what, why, don't forget when. I'll tell you a story I can't wait to begin. I'll tell you all my feelings, you'll sense it's from the heart. I'll tell you a story I can't wait to start. The whole farmyard ran as fast as they could. They ran down to the river beside the wood. You can't trust a fox's smile to climb upon its back, 'cause even in a story you must believe the facts. Who, where, what, why, don't forget when. I'll tell you a story I can't wait to begin. I'll tell you all my feelings, you'll sense it's from the heart. I'll tell you a story I can't wait to start. Who, where, what, why, don't forget when. I'll tell you a story I can't wait to begin. I'll tell you all my feelings, you'll sense it's from the heart. I'll tell you a story I can't wait to start.
In the middle of the old town there was a square with shops and cafes on every side, and everyone would come there to dance to the fine music the village musicians would play. In fact, the only time the great town square wasn't used for dancing was when it rained and when the market was there on a Saturday afternoon. They would dance the sweet salsa on a Saturday and Sunday, merengue on a Monday, twist on a Tuesday, waltz on a Wednesday, twirl on a Thursday, and families were always welcome on a Friday. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers could come at any time, but Friday night was the one that everyone liked the best, because grannies and granddads, aunties and uncles would take each other in their arms and dance and dance and dance. When I said everyone, there was one person, a little baby sitting in a pushchair, who would watch and cry. When everyone else had a smile on their faces, she would scream and bawl, weep and wail the instant the music started, and once she could see the people moving and swaying in time to the music, she would screech and holler. But her mother and father always said, "She'll get over it." But she didn't. It was when she learned to talk that they knew she was different from all of the other children in the town. Her first words were, "Don't like dance." These were quickly followed by, "Don't want dance." "Can't make me dance." "Don't like dance." She put her small hands into very big fists, and she would scream and cry when she went to the town. "Don't like dance. Don't want dance. Can't make me dance. Don't like dance." Her parents were worried, and everyone would look at them. But it became easier for her mother and father to leave her at home with one of her sisters and brothers, while the rest of the family went out to dance. When her dad had to stay behind with his little daughter, he could hear the music from the town square wafting in through the open windows in the hot autumn nights. He would hold little Lily in his arms and sway to the sound of the distant dance beat, but as soon as he moved in time to the music, she would beat her hands on his chest and scream, "Don't like dance, don't want dance, can't make me dance, don't like dance." He would think that it was funny and smile as he put her to sleep in a cot, and he would wish that he could be with his family on such a beautiful night. But things never changed. As she got older, she could say quite clearly and forcefully, "I do not like to dance. I do not want to dance. You cannot make me dance. I do not want to dance." She would shake her hands in the air and move her arms as she said this. She didn't scream, but it was very clear that she did not want to dance. It wasn't that she couldn't move gracefully. She could jump and skip and was the best at running in the school. Her friends all liked her, but as soon as you mentioned music and dancing, her hands would tighten and her lips would go thin and white, and you could hear her mutter under her breath, "Don't like dance. Don't want to dance. You can't make me dance. I do not like to dance." One day, there was a big sign in the town about a dancing competition in the school, and everyone was excited. They all shouted across the street to each other, "A dancing competition, a dancing competition, a dancing competition with a big prize, a huge prize. And Alfonso, the waltzing woodcutter from Petrovia, will be the judge." It was almost as if the whole town knew about it, and they would be seen in and out of their houses practicing their best movements. People, when they came home from work, would immediately put their dancing shoes on and jitterbug and jive, jump and slide in time to music coming out of their windows. The smiles that lit up all of the men and boys, women and girls' faces could be seen for miles around. The dogs and cats would sway their tails in time with the music and bark in excitement at the way that everyone, well, nearly everyone, felt so happy about the dancing competition. For Lily, it was terrible. Her voice was nearly gone with having to whisper to herself, "Don't like dance, don't want to dance, can't make me dance, don't like dance, don't like dance, don't want to dance, can't make me dance, don't like to dance." You could hear her friends sigh and try not to talk about dancing, but it was very hard when it was all that they could think about. For weeks they cut at cloth and made costumes that would dazzle you with their beauty and elegance. But Lily just wished for it to all be over, and to be over very soon. At last, the day of the competition came, and Alfonso, the waltzing woodcutter, slid into the school through the double swing doors. I cannot say that he walked, because Alfonso had never walked in all of his life. He would raise himself up on his tiptoes and glide, slip and turn rather than walk. His costume was a beautifully crisp white shirt, a wide red belt, trousers that were so well pressed you would be in danger of getting cut by the crease at the front, and fine, soft leather shoes. People gasped as, with one last elegant arm-waving twirl, he sat himself down in front of all of the children, clapped his heavy, hard hands and spoke, "Let the dancing commence." His jet-black hair was immaculate, not a single hair out of place, as he flashed his smile at all of the nervous, sitting children. For Lily, it was bad enough when the music came from the square, but to have the competition in the school was terrible. Over and over she whispered, "Don't like dance, don't want dance, can't make me dance, don't like dance." But nobody took any notice, as they took their turns and stood and danced, in ones and in pairs, in teams and in circles. Lily never budged from her seat. She just kept muttering, "Don't like dance, don't want dance, can't make me dance, don't like dance." All through the competition, the smile never left Alfonso's face. He knew about this town and all of its dancing, and he was now starting to feel awful that someone would have to be the winner, and some people would not be going home with a prize. Lily was feeling glad that the dancing was coming to an end, and as Alfonso, the waltzing woodcutter from Petrovia, stood up to give out the final prizes, he said, "It has been a very difficult day for me to watch all of the fine dancers you have in this town." Even as he spoke, Lily was talking through her teeth. "Don't like dance, don't want dance, can't make me dance, don't like dance." It made the waltzing woodcutter stop and look about to see who was talking as he was speaking. He pulled at the frills on his shirt and started again. "Anyway, as I said, it has been a very hard day for me, and I have really liked the way that you have dressed yourselves in your best costumes and—" Lily was still spluttering. "Don't like dance, don't want dance, can't make me dance, don't like dance." Alfonso turned his head to Lily. "You, young lady, you did not get up to dance. I think that it is not fair that everyone had a chance to dance and you did not get up." He walked over to Lily, who was now turning pink with anger and embarrassment. "I think that you should give us a dance." He twirled and floated back to his seat and smiled. But he was the only one who was smiling. There was a lot of nervous coughing and whispering among the parents, teachers, and children. Lily stood still in the middle of the floor, with everyone's eyes on her. Alfonso looked around and shrugged his shoulders, as he didn't know about Lily, or the way that she hated to dance. The smile was slipping from his face, as Lily started to say in her smallest voice, as she pushed her fists at her sides, "Don't like dance, don't want dance, can't make me dance, I don't like to dance." "You, young lady." Alfonso was looking at all of the teachers for some help. "You, young lady, I cannot hear what you are saying. Please talk a little louder." Lily was punching the air and stamping her feet as she started to speak. "Don't like dance. I don't want dance. You can't make me dance. I don't like to dance." Again he stretched forward to try and hear her. "You, young lady, I cannot hear what you are saying. Please talk a little louder." Lily was turning around, faster and faster, and flapping her arms in the air as she used all of the air in her body to let everyone know just what she was thinking. "I don't like dance. I don't want to dance. You can't make me dance. I don't like to dance." Alfonso, the waltzing woodcutter, had a strange, puzzled look on his face as Lily moved from one end of the school hall to the other. All of her arm movements were up and down, and her voice was loud and ringing in the air. "I don't like to dance. I don't want to dance. You can't make me dance. I do not like to dance." By now, all of the teachers were looking at Alfonso, and they couldn't believe their eyes, as he was smiling again and clapping his hands in time to Lily's song. "I don't like dance. I don't want to dance. You can't make me dance. I do not like to dance." He was starting to sway from side to side, and he stood up and moved to the floor. As Lily was shouting and screaming, he was wriggling and moving. Soon all of the children were laughing and clapping to see Lily, after all of the time that they had known her, move so gracefully in time to their hand claps. On and on, Lily and the woodcutter danced. Soon the teachers were on their feet, and the whole of the school was filled with people moving, swaying, laughing and singing. Alfonso shouted, "Stop, stop, stop!" He had a wild and a crazy look in his eye as he stood gasping for breath as the teachers, parents and children sat down. Lily couldn't stop her dancing, but as she swept across the floor one last time, she could see that everyone was smiling, and Alfonso was walking towards her with a cup and a check in his hand. She did hear what he had to say. "Ladies and gentlemen, I thought that my job was difficult, but now that I have seen this display of the finest of all dancers, I think that you must agree that this girl," he pointed to Lily, "this girl is one of the best that I have ever seen in all of my life, and she should win the prize." Lily stopped, looked up, as everyone was smiling at her, and she couldn't stop herself from laughing as she was holding the heavy golden cup high above her head in her hands. The next day, when she walked down the street to school, people smiled and waved and imitated the arm-flapping, foot-stomping dance that they had seen her doing in the old school hall. Her face was in the local newspaper, receiving the cup from a red-faced Alfonso with her parents by her side. When she was asked what she was going to buy with the money she had won as the best dancer in the town, she had simply said, I think I'll buy some dancing shoes.
I'm going to sing my rainbow song. It's not very short and it won't take long. It's as red as a rose, it's as orange as a leaf on an autumn day. I'm going to sing my rainbow song. It's not very short, it won't take long. It's as yellow as the sun, it's as green as the grass on a summer holiday. I'm going to sing my rainbow song. It's not very short and it won't take long. It's as blue as the sea, it's as purple as a bruise when I fall and cut my knee. I'm going to sing my rainbow song. It's not very short and it won't take long. It's as red as a rose, it's as orange as a leaf, it's as yellow as the sun, it's as green as the grass, it's as blue as the sea, it's as purple as a bruise when I fall and cut my knee. I'm going to sing my rainbow song. It's not very short and it didn't take long.
Every Friday, Johnny would go to the park, whether it was raining, snowing, windy, or the sun was high in the air. He loved to feed the ducks and the swans, and he would make sure that he had some dried bread for them to eat. He didn't mind the weather, no matter what it did. He would save all of his crusts for the ducks, even though his mum told him that he wouldn't get curly hair if he didn't eat his crusts. He didn't care, because his black hair was very curly indeed, and he definitely didn't want it to be any curlier. Anyway, he loved to hear the ducks quack quack their thank yous as they gobbled up the bread. He loved the way that the swans would waddle up to him and take the bread and shake their necks and swallow it down like snakes at the zoo. One cold and windy day, he went down by the side of the rough roaring sea and entered the park through the high iron gates, and he could see that he was the only person there. He was often the only person there at the park feeding the ducks in the bad weather.
It was the fine big swans that started to come towards him, and they honked and squawked as he reached into his coat and pulled out the thin plastic bag filled with the bread and dry crusts. The noisy ducks were just behind them because they were hungry, very hungry indeed. Just you wait your turn. There's plenty for everybody." Johnny was laughing as he pulled a slice of granary bread out of the bag. As he was going to throw it into the water for the birds flocking around the edge of the boating lake, it was picked up by the wind, and off it flew into the air and over to the sea. "Don't worry, I've got lots and lots and loads of bread." But the next piece of bread went out and into the sea. The birds were clucking and fussing by his boots, and in no time at all he had not a single crumb of bread left for the birds. He didn't know what to do, but he thought that he could go back by the side of the silvery sea, go home and get some more bread. Johnny wasn't sure that he had heard it, but as he walked by the side of the silvery sea, the fish in the sea were all coming to the top of the salty water and were calling out and saying, "Oh, thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Johnny. The bread was so much better than the worms and the slippery things that we have to eat. Could you please bring us more next Friday?" From that time, Johnny could be seen carrying bread. 2 bags of bread, one for the fish and one for the ducks and the swans. And the ducks would quack quack their "thank you," and the swans would squawk their "oh, thank you." And even when he was a grown man, he would carry the bread for all of his animal friends. You might see him there by the side of the boating lake, with a piece of bread in his hand and a huge smile on his face.
When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? Do whales and fish fight? Do they go to bed at night? Do they wake up in the morning with a terrible fright? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? The starfish shine, the shark's really kind. If you ride upon a seahorse, would he mind? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? The fish finger crickets have nails, the trumpet fish do scales. When Jonah got swallowed, did he sing good in Wales? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? Slipper fish wear high heels with soles and eels. If you trod upon its tail, would a catfish squeal? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? When the rain falls down on a fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? Halo, said the angel fish, hopping onto a carp. Do you know stonefish don't sink and razor fish ain't so sharp? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? Do whales and fish fight? Do they go to bed at night? Do they wake up in the morning with a terrible fright? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me? When the rain falls down on the fish in the sea, do they get wet like you and me?
With the short red curly hair, he loved to go and climb the trees in the broad forest. There were all kinds of different trees, tall trees, wide trees, trees with small branches, trees that filled the whole of the sky. But when he looked around with his bright green eyes, he loved everything that he saw that could grow, that could fly, that could creep, that could crawl, and all of the plants and flowers that grew. On this hot sunny day, he'd left his cat back in the house, and as he'd gone out of the door, he'd shouted to his mother that he was going to go into the forest. "I'll be in the forest, but I'll be back in time for my tea." He looked all around. He loved the forest. It was as if he knew every single inch of it, all of the places that he could go, all of the things that he could see. Now he rubbed his strong hands against his short-sleeved striped T-shirt. His T-shirt was yellow and blue and pink and white, and it was his favourite T-shirt. It was a little bit raggedy at the side, but he looked and thought, "Oh no, I'm going to take another 15... No, I'm going to take 20... No, I'm going to take 25 more steps into the forest, and then I'm going to turn." But he hadn't even taken one step when he tripped over something at his feet. It was a stick. It was half in the muddy ground and half out of it. And he scratched at his chin and he rubbed at his head and he spoke out loud, "Oh, I wonder what that is." It wasn't long before he was down on his knees, and his knees, covered with his blue jeans, were starting to get muddy, but he didn't care. He scratched and he scraped at the soil and he found that it was a walking stick. A walking stick with writing at the top. He'd seen it in the town, and he was trying to remember who it could possibly belong to. But it was starting to get dark. He thought he would turn round. He thought he would go home. But when he started to turn, he looked. And he'd never really seen the forest from this side before. What am I going to do? How am I going to get out? How am I going to make sure that I don't get lost? He tied the laces on his big red shoes and he reached into his pocket. In his pocket he had a ball of string, the string that he'd been playing with the cat. The cat loved to make it run across the floor, and it loved to scratch and knock it against the side of the floorboards and the walls. And he decided that he would tie it to the stick. And that way, if he came across that piece of string, he would know that he was starting to get lost. He tied it to the stick, quick as a wink or a blink of an eye, and started to walk, always letting the string out behind him, to know where he'd been and to help him to find his way out. When he'd been walking for 5 or 10 minutes, he saw that there was a woman, an old woman with a blue cloak and a hat on her head. She was standing, resting against the trees, but there were tears running down the side of her old face. The boy, who was a good boy, walked up to her and said, "What's the matter? Can I help you?" The old woman's voice was low but loud. "I've lost my walking stick, and now I'm lost in the forest. Can you help me?" The boy smiled. Was it long? Was it thin? Was it brown? Did it have a handle at the top and a piece of metal at the side, and was there some writing on it? The old woman looked hopefully at him. "Yes, that's it. Have you seen it?" The boy said, "I have. It wasn't mine, and I didn't want to take it, so I tied the end of the string to it. You wait here, please." Well, it wasn't as if the old woman was going to go anywhere. She was there, and she was stuck, because she couldn't walk without a stick. She'd lost it. The boy ran all the way back along the length of the string, picked up the stick and wound the string around the stick and brought it back to the old woman. "Oh, thank you. Thank you. You're such a good boy. Thank you very much." And the two of them walked out of the forest. For this woman knew the woods even better than the boy. But when she came to the side of a house, she said to him, "You know, to reward you, I think I'd like to give you—" But she stopped talking, because running in between her legs and round at her feet and between her knees, there was the boy's cat, purring and reaching towards the string on the stick. The two of them laughed. "I take it that this is your cat, is it? I do like cats. Well, I tell you what I'll do. I've got a piece of fish, a lovely piece of fish for your cat. But I think for the two of us, we should have some sweet apple pie." The boy was hungry. It had been a long time since he'd been home. But when the boy became a man, he would often think, when he looked at the forest, and remember the time when he was a boy and he helped an old woman, and he could almost taste that sweet apple pie on his lips.
Bessie just loved being out in the middle of the dew-covered fields in the early morning sunshine. She knew that she shouldn't be here. She'd been told often enough by her mum and dad, and she could hear their stern voices in her head as she danced amongst the buttercups and daisies. But right here, on the edge of the new pit, she felt as happy as a 4-year-old could feel. It had been easy for her to make her way out of the crowded bed at the top of the house, but the squeak of the latch and the creak of the front door had nearly woken everyone in the house. Having to share a room with her 7 brothers and sisters was one thing, but Ginny's elbows were as sharp as an axe when she tossed and turned in her sleep, and Bessie had had enough. Dressing as the sun rose, she was determined that she would go and see her dad as he came home from the mine, and, with her grandma's old teddy under her arm, she started to make her way up the great pile of dusty black coal that made the green of the field look even greener. "You keep me safe, won't you?" She hugged at the worn neck of the small white teddy in her arms. This was a precious toy. In fact, it was the only toy that she had in all of this world, and she took him everywhere with her. As she scrambled on, she reached a flattened place in the great stinking pile of coal, and she could see over the manager's high brick wall and into his beautifully tended garden. It was the yellow of the flowers that first caught her eye, but the smell of the apples, juicy, green and ripe, that cut right through the industrial stench all about her. Sure he wouldn't miss one. Not just one apple. He's got so many, and I've only got. She paused in her thinking out loud as she squeezed the teddy in her arms even more tightly. "I've only got you and my dad." For the moment she had forgotten about the whole of her snoring family, and for the moment she had forgotten about the things she'd been told by her mother and father about stealing. Quick as a blink of an eye, she was down by the fence at the front of the garden and under the rusty wire and into the manager's orchard. The apple trees were groaning under the weight of their rich bounty of fruit, and many had fallen onto the soft green earth below. If she was to pick one up from off the ground, then she didn't have to take it from the tree, and it seemed even less like stealing. Bessie rubbed a fine round green apple on the front of her pinafore dress. She'd been so careful to keep it clean when she'd first got it, but now, what with her adventures on the coal heap, the cotton of its cloth, well, it was streaked with black and grime, but she just didn't care. The apple was now hers, and she was going to give it to her dad. She could imagine the huge, black-rimmed grin on his face as he took a bite out of it, and he rubbed at her tousled hair in the early morning sunlight as they made their way back home together. She had a smile on her face as she slipped out of the garden and started to go across the coal heap once more. Now that she was dirty, she didn't really care if she got any dirtier, and she was dancing in between the huge mounds of coal and making for the field at the side of the pit head. She leapt, she bounced, she skidded and slipped on the shining black lumps of coal. If she had walked slowly and carefully, then she would have made it safely to the other side, but care and safety were words you could never use when Bessie was about. Her mother would laugh at her and scold her. "You, Bessie, you're as clumsy as a cart horse in a market." It was true. She was clumsy, and now she was slipping in the greasy coal, and it was sliding all around her. First, she couldn't move her legs, and then she was trapped up to her waist. She wanted to be anywhere else but here, and when she couldn't move at all, she let out a great wail of a tear-stained scream that would have woken up the world, if the world had been listening. She was far away from home, and too far away from her friends, and no one could hear her, no one except the farmer. He wasn't too pleased that the pit had dropped all of its coal on his good pasture land, so he was no friend to the coal miners or the managers. Stopping the two great horses in front of him with a click of his tongue and a "Come on, you varmints," he had a curious smile on his face when he saw her. "Well, whatever next? Talk and scream and coal. I've seen many things, but I've never seen coal that could talk." He was laughing now as he took a closer look at her, stuck right up to her waist in the coal. Bessie did look as black as the heaped coals around her, and all that could really be seen of her was the white of her eyes and the pink tear stains down her blackened cheeks. "Please, please, please get me out!" Her voice was like a foghorn, but it only made the farmer laugh again. "Why, that's a mighty big voice for such a small girl, but I suppose I'd better get you out before they hoy you on the fire as well." He reached for a lead rope on the bigger of the two horses, and with a practised, quick flick of his strong hands, it was around her. She hung on for all that she was worth, and was dragged out of the clutches of the coal. He couldn't stop himself from smiling as he looked at her as she scrambled to her feet, scratched and bruised, bleeding from her shin, and whimpering in front of him. "You've got yourself in a right old pickle, and that's for sure. Black as the ace of spades you are. I'll get my missus to clean you up, and get you back to your house before your mum and dad find you missing." He looked at her in the way that the vicar would look at a naughty choir boy. "But if I was to clean you up and get you home, what are you going to give me? Nothing comes from nothing, and you've got to pay for my help. What have you got, young Bessie?" She was still clutching at her teddy, and there was no way that she would give him up. The only thing that she had was the apple. With dust-covered fingers, she pulled it from the pocket of her dress and put it in front of the farmer. An apple. A green apple. A ripe, green, juicy apple. "Well, I ain't no teacher, but I want to know where you got that apple from." Too frightened to speak, she nodded her head towards the manager's garden. The farmer sucked in his breath and looked for all the world as if he was going to sentence her to death for being a thief. But he couldn't hold his laughter in any more. "That'll do nicely, I think." Her hand looked so small compared to the great spade of a fist he had at the end of his arms, and before she knew it, he had put her up on the back of the great brown horse, and they were walking towards his old cottage. "This tastes all the sweeter 'cause you got it from them." He spat the words out, and the juice of the apple was on his unshaven chin. Bessie had wanted to give the apple to her father, but she was grateful for the help the farmer was giving her. See, she secretly hoped that he would let her have some, maybe half, perhaps a bite of the apple. But her hopes faded as he crunched and munched at the manager's apple. He saw this apple as a victory over those who had stolen his good pasture, and he was not going to share his moment of triumph with anybody. As the farmer's wife wrapped her up in a great woolen blanket, and watching her clothes dry by the farmer's roaring fire, Bessie asked if she could have at least the core of the apple. "Of course you can." The farmer smiled as he handed over the pips, stalk, and the last remaining flesh of the apple. "You be good now, and don't you turn yourself into no more talking coal." He chuckled as he went out to finish his work in the fields. True to his word, with the farmer's wife's help, she was back at home before anyone had noticed that she had gone, and she was slipped inside of her bed, with Ginny's razor-sharp, but somehow now friendly elbows digging in her ribs. At breakfast, her mother looked at Bessie in a strange way, for her daughter had woken up cleaner than when she had gone to bed, and Bessie, concentrating on her food, was not going to tell her about all or any of her adventures. What she did do was to put the pips into the warm soil at the back of the house, and as the years went by, the seeds became an apple tree that grew tall and strong, just as Bessie turned from a little girl to a kind and sensible woman. In the autumn sunshine, she would dance beneath its branches, loaded with fruit, and if she ever thought about having an adventure, she would touch the small, thin, blue, coal dust scar at the front of her shin, and remember a little girl dancing amongst the buttercups and daisies.
On a cold day in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a tall girl heard a thunderstorm outside of the ship. At first she was scared. Many of the older passengers were running from one side of the new liner to the other to look out of the windows. Many of them thought that it was the bombers that they had read about in their newspapers. On the side of the harbour earlier that day, they had talked bravely about being glad to be able to show everyone that there was no chance of them being sunk. "We will be too far out at sea for anyone to sink us."
Their faces may have looked out bravely from the front of the magazines and papers that recorded their maiden voyage from Dublin to New York, but their voices gave them away as they now scrambled about the ship in a blind panic. It was only as the crew showed them that it was nothing more nor less than a freak storm that they started to pat at their clothing and give each other glances and whisper, "I wasn't really scared, of course. I knew it was a storm at sea. You could say it was a storm and a storm and a..." And here they would pick up their saucers and laugh hysterically as they flapped open and wafted their fans over their hot teas. "You could say it was a storm in a teacup." The girl, who was glad that they weren't under attack, left the subdued chaos of the dining room and went to a small cabin and locked the door behind her. She had been left behind by a family to sort out the family home, and her father had spoken to her in a way that made her feel as if she had grown from a girl to a woman. "Deirdre, I need you to sort out all of our things and sell the house to McConnell. Don't take less than the 12,500 we've agreed. He knows it's worth more than that, but he'll still try and beat you down. Bring what jewels and gold that you can, and we'll have a party for you in St. Patrick's on 5th Avenue when you get to us in a month's time." She was tall for her age, but hearing her father talk to her in this way made her feel as if she could pluck the very stars from the sky. It had been a hard bargain, but she stood for none of Finbar, Michael, Declan McConnell's shenanigans, and the bargain was struck. She pulled at the pillow and looked at the wad of money that was nearly as big as her fist, and the heavy velveteen bag of jewels that rattled in the poorly lit cabin. What light there was went out as there was another flash of lightning outside, and it played havoc with the wrangled nerves of the passengers upstairs. Muffled gasps and cries went throughout the whole of the ship until the power was almost immediately restored. Deirdre was glad to be away from the panic-laden dining room and safe inside the warmth of the liner. She could hear the tinkle of fine-bone china as the endless "storm in a teacup" joke was repeated. She was glad to be inside as she wiped the condensation from the inside of the porthole, and as another flash of lightning momentarily cut out the lights, she could see something in the sky that was dark and winged. Her superstitious mind thought of the angel of death that her dad's mother, Granny Baxter, always went on about. She rubbed at her eyes, and then at the brass-rimmed porthole to check that she was not dreaming, or that it wasn't a trick of her mind or the light. As the light was restored, she whispered impatiently, "Come on! Flash again!" She scoured the sky. "Go on! Flash again! Damn you!" She would never have said that in front of her father, whether she was a woman or not. "Go on! Flash! Flash! Damn you!" Her heart was racing, and her curse was answered. By the glare of the lightning, heading their way, and bigger than any dark angel of death, the bomber was coming closer to them. She didn't wait for a single heartbeat. She knew that the signs on the doors said to leave everything behind when there was danger. But she pulled on her thickest coat, the one with a deep poacher's pocket in the red imitation satin lining, and thrust the jewels and the wad of money into it and ran out of the cabin. She knew that to run into the dining room would be foolish, and there would be nothing gained in warning an already jittery, panic-filled crowd of people. She was literally going straight to the top. She was going to the captain. With her coat pulled up to her chin and around her shoulders, she went across the deck, up the stairs, all the while fighting to gain her breath against the howling rain and wind. She was not going to be stopped in her mission. On a finer day, there would have been a guard at the bottom of the stairs to stop anyone going up. But on this storm-ravaged night, they had thought that there wouldn't be a single sensible soul who would brave the elements to get to the captain. They all turned from their shining dials and switches to stare at this bedraggled, waterlogged woman in front of them. The captain cursed. "What in the name is that?" He pointed at Deirdre. She had to gasp for air, but she was not going to be stopped. Her mother had taught her that. "Captain, Captain, you must look up into the sky. I believe there is a bomber there, and it is getting closer by the minute." Although they could not see it, the bomber was circling for a third time. The pilot hardly believing his luck that such a prize was lying in the water and ready for the killing. He was going to go around just one more time to make sure that his luck was in. The captain nodded his head in her direction, and someone reached for a chair. But just as she was about to sit down, and just as she was about to think about getting this, he was about to think about getting this madman off his bridge, the lightning flashed again, and they could see, and now hear, the engines of this enemy bomber. Buttons were pushed and lights were pressed on this impressive array of the control panel. Silently and with a clockwork efficiency, the officers pointed to men and passed signals down internal telephone lines. Deirdre was glad that she had learned so much from her mother, and sat and marvelled at the way that everything was done for the passengers to get off the ship in the easiest and least panic-filled way. It might have been a terrible night, but there was nothing else that she could do but line up with the others and get into a life raft just as the bomber returned for its first deadly swoop. The first stick of bombs hit the water but shook and rocked the boat from side to side, which helped those passengers who were indecisive about getting into the lifeboats. His next run was definitely on target, but pierced the prow with a shuddering jolt that seemed to light up the sky as if it was the day. Deirdre wanted to be brave, but was shivering with fear, but glad to be on board a full life raft and moving away from the carnage before her eyes. She knew there would be losses, but nowhere near as many as the losses that would have happened if she had not looked out of the porthole and kept her head. With each new fall of bombs and explosions from the liner, a dark night rainbow grew in the sky as the rain fell and the lightning flashed. Beside her on the life raft there was an old woman she had seen in the dining room, waving a fan. She could see how wet Deirdre was, and she spoke to her. "My dear, you will have to take that wet coat off." The girl, now truly a woman, smiled, and she put her hand inside of the lining for a reassuring touch of her family's remaining wealth. "Oh, I'm all right," she beamed and almost laughed. "I think I'll keep my coat on until I get to St. Pat's, if that's all right with you." He was working in the new fun fair selling big, long, oval balloons, but his strict, straight smile was frightening the children. It brought a thin smile to his even thinner lips, as he knew that if they were frightened by him, then they wouldn't ask their mothers and fathers to buy them a balloon. That would mean that he didn't have them bothering him, and that would mean he wouldn't have to do any work. His spiky red hair stuck straight up out of the top of his head, and it was nearly as red as his hooded, fleeced jacket. If anyone had said anything about it being one size too big for him, he would only have to curl his stubby fingers into a hard fist, and they would have run away. The fact was that as far as he was concerned, the jacket wasn't his, It was his father's. He had dressed in a hurry and had taken the new coat. He had taken it down from the peg in the hall and unwrapped it from its crisp cellophane and plastic and pulled the earthy, new material smell in through his small, straight nose. I don't see why he should have something new when I want to have it. If I want it, then I'll take it. His voice had been low and threatening as he had gone out of the door. He was a horrible boy. He would shout, he would steal, and anything that he could do to make other people unhappy made him very happy indeed. He was no stranger to anger, and whoever had asked him to look after the balloons at the fun fair really didn't know him very well at all. You could not have found a more unpleasant person if you had tried. I don't want you to think that he didn't have any friends. He did. Not very many, just 10 friends in the whole world. They treated him well and they tried to show him how to be kind, but he just ignored them and treated them as badly as he did everyone else that he met. It was as he was standing by the side of the Dodgem cars, glowering with his scary brown eyes, that a little baby, sitting up in a long brown pram, looked at him in the way that babies can, all open-mouthed and eyed, and she popped another sweet into her soft, dribbly wet mouth. The baby wasn't scared of him. She was fascinated by the way that he was dressed, with cut-off jeans all curly and frayed, and with her eyes and her face just at his knee height, she laughed out loud at the hairiness of his gangly legs. His face flushed with anger, and he waggled his heavy, closed fist in the baby's face. She thought this was hilarious, and wagged her hands at him. He was not pleased. "Don't you laugh at me, you little... Before the baby had the chance to imitate his angry voice, he pushed his hand deep into the bag of sweets and stuffed them into his mouth. The little girl hadn't understood his fists, but she was not going to let him steal her sweets. A blood-thickening "Wah!" came from her lips, and her mother and father looked at her to find out what was the matter, and what or who had caused her to be so upset. "Wah!" she continued, and pointed at the boy. He had a mouthful of her sweets, and was trying his best to look as if he didn't have a mouthful of sweets. But he had taken so many, and he had filled every corner of his mouth with their sherbet sharpness, that he was finding it very difficult not to explode with sugary saliva. The father, who was not a small or a weak man, came closer to him. The boy tried to hide behind the balloons, but the breeze was making it very difficult to keep them between the father and him. With a calloused, accusing finger, he pointed at the boy. "Do you know anything about what has made our Brittany May upset?" "Wah! Wah! Wah!" went Brittany May. All he could manage in reply was a spit-filled Just then, one of the Dodgems came to a shuddering crash at the edge of the ride. It gave the air an electrical smell like a fused toaster, and the father looked at where she was pointing, and ignored the boy and said, "It must have been the Dodgems that scared you, isn't it?" The father bent down to the precious child and looked at the boy as he desperately tried to wipe the sticky juice from his chin with the sleeve of his father's jacket. "Mind you," his voice was menacing, "mind you, if I find that someone's caused my little angel," he patted Brittany May's few golden curls, "if I find out someone's caused my beautiful little angel any upset, then I'd knock the blocks off." The baby beamed at her father and pointed at the boy. He had never been scared in his life, and he didn't like the feeling. He was shivering and shaking from the top of his spiky red hair to the tips of his, too big for him, stolen from the shoe shop, black trainers. The father mistook his daughter's pointing and thought that she wanted one of the gaudy balloons. Once again he towered over the boy and asked, "Here, son, how much are the balloons?" As the father wiped the spray from off his face, he took out the £2 he thought that he'd been asked for and handed them over and took the biggest balloon in the bunch. He gave it to his daughter and muttered something about not being able to make out a word that balloon kid said, and that Brittany May made more sense. As the last of the noisy sweets was swallowed by the boy. All of this had been watched from a distance by his 10 friends. Once the giant of a father was out of sight, they stood around him. It was the smallest of all of the boys who spoke first. "Well, that was a close thing, no doubt about it. You could have been in big trouble there, John." John spoke slowly and carefully, not with a kind tone, but with a hint of relief in his shaking voice. What are you lot doing here? Anyway, what are you doing here?" He looked at this group around him. One by one, he looked at them to try and find some clue as to why they had come to the fun fair. His voice was stronger now. "Have you come to make fun of me? How did you know I would be here?"
"That was easy,"
a lean boy from the back of the crowd laughed.
"We saw your dad, and he said that you would be wearing your new birthday jacket that he had bought for you. And we've brought something for you as well."
They awkwardly shuffled forward and pushed a hard, brightly wrapped box towards him. He passed the balloons to one of his friends, and his trembling, surprised fingers tore and pulled at the flimsy paper, and he even smiled as he opened this birthday present his friends had taken the time to get and to deliver to him. "You shouldn't have. You shouldn't have." He laughed out loud, and some of his friends were shocked at the way that he was smiling so easily. They had never seen him smile before, except when he was causing someone else to be unhappy. "You shouldn't have. You shouldn't have." He opened the box and passed out the contents of the box. Huge, round, fat, sugary sherbet sweets. I'm not going to say that he was a completely changed person from that time, but he really did know what it was to have friends, and he really knew that it wasn't just something that people said. They didn't just say, "It isn't easy taking candy from a baby." She was intrigued by the great glass tower. Everyone was intrigued by the great glass tower at the top of the sweet green grassy hill. They would pound with their fists on the clear walls of the building and shout and yell and scream for it to open. They could not knock on a door or a window, for there were no windows, doors or locks to open. This is what had made her move from the top of the world to the bottom of the world, to the sides of the world, and every land to find a way to open this great puzzle of a glass tower. It was in plain sight of everyone to see that it was half filled with water. She was the kind of girl who would only see things that were half full and never half empty. The crowds at its base had ideas of gold and money hidden beneath the rippling mass of water, and it did ripple when they were beating on the walls of the tower. The sun would shine through the glass, and the water would cause shimmering rainbows to be cast onto the only green grass that there was in this dry land. It was almost laughable to hear those grown men and women pleading for the tower to open. Their cries were like those of children wanting an extra treat or a toy when they know that they have enough already in their lives. If they could have listened to themselves, they would have heard only the selfish wishes of something for themselves. Although the land was dry, the cattle and sheep were hardy and needed only a few mouthfuls of the grass from the hill to sustain themselves, and all of the people lived as well as could be expected on the few days of rain that fell into the sluggish rivers at the base of the hill. The girl had been travelling for many months, and now she was tired as she watched the townsfolk yelling and kicking at the walls of the tower. She'd seen many things, she'd been to many lands, and now she had a smile on her lips that grew weary as she listened to them all being greedy and selfish. She had to push one farmer out of the way who had grown so frustrated with his useless attempts to get the tower to give up its secret that he had taken to kicking the sides of the glass wall. He was indignant and angry, but secretly glad that he did not have to continue with his ranting. Her slow, graceful approach to the walls of the tower caused a hush to descend on the town. She raised her hand as if she were going to knock on the walls, but, as if in a dance, she turned on the spot and placed her back to the tower and smiled at the people that she had known since she was a child. Some had their mouths open and in a dumb gawk. Others nudged their companions and indicated with a touch to their foreheads that they considered that she was a fool. Nevertheless, no one spoke as they wanted to see what she was going to do. What she was going to do that they had not already done themselves. Her smile was knowing as she looked at them one by one, and her voice was true and calm. "There is nothing inside of this tower that I want for myself." The nudging, whispering, and the gawping continued. She repeated what she had said, much to the amusement of the giggling cynics in the crowd. "There is nothing in this tower that I want for myself." Nothing happened. Nothing happened within the tower, and the voices of the crowd could be heard clearly as they started to mock her efforts. But the girl had an authority in her voice that made many stand and stare and wait to see if anything would happen where so many had failed. The crowd was starting to move away, but they stopped when a slow, grinding, gurgling noise came from the tower. Some cried out in fear, others cried with joy, as the clear bricks by the side of the girl started to move and cool, fresh, clean, cold water started to cascade about the girl and down the mountain and into the once dry rivers. Some wanted to pull her away from the torrent of water that fell all around her, but she raised her hand to stop any attempt to pull her out of the raging water. Her voice could be heard above the rush of the water. "There is nothing in this tower that I want for myself." And with this, she stepped away from the tower and stood among the crowd. Some congratulated her on making this valley one where rivers could flow freely. Some grabbed her hand and fell to their knees in front of her as if she were a saint. Others clasped her to them, knowing that they would never need for water for their fields or animals. The girl just smiled, knowing that her work was done and that she had to move away from all of these people that she had known and had helped. Her work was done, but she had to move away from that place, for her vow had brought water to her homeland, but only for others. There was nothing in the tower that she wanted for herself. The water would flow from a half-full tower forever for everyone else, but not for her. As she walked away, she left not a drop of water as a trail on the ground, and if those who had taken the time to look or think or sense, they would have seen that the water had not lain on her clothes when they clasped her to them. They would have sensed that her hand was dry when they shook it. They would have thought and realised that she had done all of this for them.